Yo people, what's going on? Thanks for coming back to another episode of Or Audio, and today we're going to be building a drum pad with Swift Playgrounds on your iPad. So go grab your device and let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is download the Swift Playgrounds app if you don't already have it. I already do, so I'm going to keep that open. And next thing we're going to do is add an app. Now you can name this whatever you want. I'm going to rename it as Drum Pad. There we go. And now this has a nice little app for you. You can click on that app and change the settings. So I always like to change the app icon to something fun. So I'm going to do a music note here. And then everything else you can keep the same as long as you, unless you plan on uploading this later to the App Store. And next I'm going to add a Swift package that we're going to need to do some audio stuff. So of course, you guessed it, we're going to be using AudioKit. So AudioKit/AudioKit, enter that package. And I'm just going to keep everything the same, make sure I'm using the latest version, which it is. Add to project. Awesome, so now in our main view here, we can go ahead and import AudioKit. All right. So one of the first things we're going to do is we need to provide the audio to this app. So what we're going to do is create an audio class, and this is going to inherit from something called observable object. And then inside this class, we are going to add a MIDI device. So we're going to say let MIDI equals MIDI. And most of you, if you're a producer watching this video, you probably know what MIDI is, but if you don't, it stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, and it's music's way of transferring one of music's many dimensions in the digital world. So next, inside this audio class, we're going to make a function that's going to create our MIDI. So we're going to say make MIDI is what I'm going to call it. So make MIDI. All right, and in this function, we're going to open the MIDI port for our audio. So we're going to say MIDI.open output. And when we want to destroy our MIDI, what we can do is say func destroy MIDI. And next we're going to do MIDI.close output this time. Awesome. So next, let's go inside our view and start declaring the audio. So I'm going to say state object, which means that this view owns this audio object that produces the audio. So state object var audio is equal to audio. Awesome. So a couple other things I'm going to do with this view is I'm going to add what happens when this view appears. So what I want to happen when my view appears on screen is I want that MIDI to be created. So we can do audio.create or make MIDI. And then on disappear, I want to destroy that MIDI port because I'm not using it anymore. So I'm going to do audio.destroy MIDI. And finally, for other views to use later, I'm going to pass this object into the app's environment. So I'm going to say environment object audio. Awesome. So next we're going to make a drum pad, and it should be pretty simple with Swift UI. That's the thing I love about this framework, is it's very simple, but it's sometimes hard to wrap your head around, especially if you're coming from a UI kit perspective. So next we're going to create a struct, which is going to be our drum pad. And this drum pad is going to be something that's identifiable, and it's also a view because it's a component of our view. And inside our drum pad, we're going to need to access that audio. So we're going to need a environment object, and we're going to do the same thing, except this time it's already passed in for us from this other view here. And next we're going to add a private var that's going to keep track of whether that drum pad is pressed or not. And initially, we're going to assume that the drum pad is not pressed. And finally, we need an ID. So var ID, which is a string, the drum pad's name. And we also need a number, which is a MIDI note number that drum pad will play. And finally, we need to return a view. So we say var body is some view because we don't know what type of view it is yet. Next, we're going to add a square for the shape of the button. So this image is going to create that shape, which is going to be system name, and then you can do square.fill, and that will create the shape for you. And we're going to modify that image a little bit because it's not going to look exactly how we want. So we're going to say this is resizable, this is aspect ratio to keep things simple, and we're going to fit it to the screen. And finally, this is where we can tell if our drum pad is being pressed. The user can tell. We're going to change the foreground based on whether this button is being pressed or not. So we're going to say is pressed. If we're pressing it or we're not pressing it, then we're going to say color.blue. And if we are pressing it, then it's going to be color.indigo. Or sorry, it's the other way around. If we're not pressing it, it's going to be indigo. And if we are pressing it, it's going to be blue. So finally, last thing we need to do is we need to modify what happens when the user interacts with this view. So we're going to add a gesture modifier, drag gesture right there, and then minimum distance is going to be 0. And I'm just going to get rid of this coordinate space because we're not going to be using that. So basically what this means is we're pressing in the center of this drum pad in order to get it to activate. Cool. So now we're going to do some modifiers to this gesture within itself. So we want to say what happens when we detect that a gesture is happening, and we detect that value of whether it's happening or not inside this code block here. We're going to say if we're not pressing the button already, then we're going to mark that we are pressing it because something changed. So the user is definitely interacting with that button. So we're going to say is pressed is equal to true. And next we're going to do audio.midi.send note on message. And this is going to trigger a MIDI event that's going to send information to our digital audio workstation. Sorry, I made a typo here. That's why the error was there. So now you should see it turn blue when it's correct. And the next thing we're going to do is say on ended. What are we going to do then? Well, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pass in a value. So let me go back to the top of here and get my value going in there. So value in, and we're going to say is pressed is false because we ended this touch. So we want to trigger a note off just like a drum pad would. So we're going to say audio.midi.send note off message. And the MIDI note number is going to be our number. So that is actually pretty much it for our app. So now if we go ahead and build it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all the contents inside of this view, inside of this V stack. Next, I'm going to make 4 horizontal stacks. So inside the first horizontal stack, we're going to add 4 drum pads. And you can probably guess what we're going to do next in the other H stacks. Awesome. So go ahead and check at the end that you have all of these drum pads and all of the correct MIDI numbers. So next thing we're going to do is go to your desktop computer, wherever you use your digital audio workstation, and I'm going to open up my favorite program called Audio MIDI Setup. And this is so cool because we can actually go in and see all of the MIDI devices. So if we say Windows Show MIDI Studio, we can see on our network all the sessions that are going on. And what I can do is I can launch this drum pad app that we just made in our Swift Playgrounds. And this is going to be pretty cool because it's going to show us all of the sessions that are going on. So first, let's add a session. And once we do that and our app is open, we'll see right away that our iPad shows up, or your device, whatever it's called. So once I hit the connect button, I'll see that there's 2 sessions here that I can connect to. And since we open up the MIDI ports in our app, those sessions are already set up and ready to go automatically. And I definitely recommend connecting your iPad to USB-C. This will help reduce the latency that you experience while you're jamming out. So without further ado, let's open up GarageBand and see if it recognizes our new drum pad. So I've already got a project set up that's using the MIDI input, so I've got preferences, and if I go to audio MIDI, it says that it's using the MIDI. GarageBand is just smart, so we'll use whatever MIDI your device is using. And then I've got a Roger Lynn drum machine here. It sounds pretty sick, and then what we can do is we can start playing on our pad here. Pretty cool, right? You can even play multiple pads at a time. I hope you all learned something and enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.